The phone rang in the middle of a silence that cost $1 million. It was a Tuesday night in Gangnam, in an office that smelled of expensive leather, old blood, and ozone. Nam-jin sat behind a mahogany desk that was wide enough to land a plane on. He was the silver tiger of the Iron Lotus Syndicate, a man whose whisper could level city blocks. Across from him sat 3 men sweating through their suits, waiting for a verdict on a debt that had gone unpaid for too long. The air was thick, heavy with the threat of violence that Nam-jin hadn't even unleashed yet. Then the vibration came. It wasn't his business phone, the sleek black device he used to order hits and move shipments. It was a burner phone, buried deep in the inside pocket of his charcoal suit jacket. A phone that only 2 people in the world had the number for. A phone that hadn't rung in 6 years. Nam-jin held up a hand. The room froze. The terrifying men across from him stopped breathing. He reached into his jacket, his fingers brushing the cold plastic, and pulled it out. The screen lit up the darkness of the room. It wasn't a contact name, just a number he knew by heart. He pressed the phone to his ear. He didn't speak. He listened. Appa. The voice was a whisper, trembling like a leaf in a storm. It was Bo Kyung, his daughter. The last time he had heard her voice, she was a child asking for a bedtime story. Now she sounded like a soldier in a trench. Appa, please come home now. Nam-jin's heart, a muscle he thought had turned to stone years ago, slammed against his ribs. Bo Kyung, he rasped, his voice rusty from disuse in this context. What is it? Are you hurt? It's Iyama, she sobbed, the sound muffled as if she was cupping her hand over the microphone. She's lost it, Appa. She's hurting him. She's going to destroy Sangwoo. In the background, cutting through the static, Nam-jin heard it. A shrill, manic screaming, the sound of glass shattering against a wall. And then the terrified, high-pitched wail of a young boy begging for it to stop. Nam-jin stood up. The leather chair behind him crashed to the floor. The 3 men across the desk flinched, reaching for their waistbands, but Nam-jin didn't even look at them. I'm coming, he said. Lock the door, hide. Do not come out until you hear my voice. He hung up. He looked at the men in the room, his eyes devoid of humanity. Get out, he said softly. The meeting is over. As he walked out into the rain, the silver tiger died. A father was born in the downpour. To understand why a man like Nam-jin was running toward a burning house, you have to understand why he left it in the first place. 10 years ago, Nam-jin wasn't a boss. He was a soldier. He had a wife he loved, a woman named Jaiwoo who smelled like peaches and rain. But the underworld does not forgive happiness. A car bomb intended for him took her instead, leaving him standing in the wreckage holding a sobbing, 3-year-old Bo Kyung and a newborn Sangwoo. That day, watching the fire crews hose down the asphalt, Nam-jin made a vow that would curse him. He decided that he was the danger. He believed that his presence was the target on their backs. So, he made a deal with the devil. He took the throne of the syndicate to gain the power to protect them, but the price was his absence. He needed a mother for them. Not a real mother. Jaiwoo could never be replaced, but a guardian. He found Yoon-suk. She was the daughter of a bankrupt chaebol family, a woman of grace, education, and impeccable social standing. She was beautiful, polished, a hurricane wrapped in silk. Nam-jin approached her with a business proposition disguised as a marriage proposal. He would restore her family's wealth and give her a life of unlimited luxury. In exchange, she would raise his children as her own and keep them safe. I will give you the world, he had told her on their wedding day, his eyes cold. I only ask that you give them a home. Yoon-suk had smiled, a perfect porcelain smile. Of course, Yobo, they will be my life. He built them a fortress in the hills of Seongbukdong. High walls, biometric scanners, guards who were paid to be invisible. And then he left. He became the Silver Tiger, sending money from the shadows, watching them grow through weekly reports and security camera feeds. He saw Bo Kyung win math awards. He saw Sangwoo learn to ride a bike. He saw Yoon-suk smiling at dinner parties. He thought he had won. He thought he had beaten the system. But cameras don't record temperature. They don't capture the tension in the air when a door slams. They don't record the whispers in the dark. Nam-jin didn't know that Yoon-suk's smile was a mask. He didn't know that she resented the children for being the shackles that bound her to a ghost husband. He didn't know that the orphan boy and the mute girl were the targets of her lonely, bitter rage. He had built a castle to keep the monsters out, never realizing he had locked the dragon inside with them. Earlier that afternoon, the rain had started to fall, drumming a relentless rhythm against the bulletproof glass of the mansion. Inside, the air was brittle. Yoon-suk was packing the living room, a glass of wine in her hand, her movements sharp and jagged. It was a storm day. Bo Kyung, now 13, sat at the kitchen island pretending to study. She had learned the art of invisibility. Don't move too fast. Don't chew too loudly. Don't exist. Sang-woo, however, was only 8. He hadn't learned the rules yet. He was sitting at the antique mahogany coffee table, Yoon-suk's favorite, working on a school project, a family tree. He was trying to draw a picture of a father he barely remembered, a blurry figure in a black suit. "Stop tapping your foot," Yoon-suk snapped, her voice cutting through the silence. "Sorry, Iyama," Sang-woo whispered. "And sit up straight. You look like a street urchin. Is that how I taught you to sit?" Sang-woo flinched, and his elbow knocked the glass of water sitting next to his paints. It happened in slow motion. The water arced across the air, splashing onto the polished wood of the table and soaking the drawing of the father. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then Yoon-suk screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of something snapping. She lunged across the room, grabbing Sang-woo by the collar of his shirt and hauling him off the floor. "You clumsy, useless little mistake," she shrieked, shaking him until his teeth rattled. "Do you know how much this table costs? Do you know what I sacrificed to be here with you?" I'm sorry," Sang-woo cried, his feet dangling off the ground. "Sorry doesn't fix it. You're just like him, just like your father, destructive, stupid, absent." She threw him onto the rug. Bo Kyung jumped up from the stool, her heart hammering. "Iyama, stop. It was an accident." Yoon-suk spun around. Her eyes wild, her makeup smeared. "You shut up. You think you're better. You think because you're quiet I don't see you judging me. I am the only reason you have clothes on your back." She grabbed a heavy vase from the mantel. Sang-woo curled into a ball, covering his head with his tiny arms. Bo Kyung didn't think. She ran. She bolted down the hallway, sliding into the linen closet and locking the door. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped the phone twice. She could hear the crashing outside. She could hear Sang-woo begging. Rule number 1, never call the private line. Rule number 2, Daddy is working. Bo Kyung broke the rules. She dialed. And as the phone rang, she held it up to the door slats, weeping silently, praying that the ghost she called Appa was real. Nam-jin was driving a German sedan that weighed 2 tons and was built like a tank. He was doing 140 kilometers per hour on the Mapo Bridge. The rain was a sheet of white noise. Other cars were blurs of red and yellow light. Nam-jin's face was a mask of stone, but his knuckles were white on the leather steering wheel. Every second that ticked by was a second Yoon-suk was alone with his son. His phone buzzed again. It wasn't Bo Kyung. It was his lieutenant. "Boss, the sharks. They saw you leave the meet. They think you're fleeing. They've blocked the north exit." "I don't care," Nam-jin said calmly. "Tell them to move or I will move them." He saw them ahead. 3 black SUVs parked horizontally across the exit ramp, blocking the route to Seongbukdong. Men in raincoats were standing by the hoods, holding bats and pipes, thinking this was a territorial dispute. They thought Nam-jin was running away. Nam-jin didn't touch the brakes. He floored the accelerator. The engine roared, a mechanical lion waking up. The men at the blockade realized too late that the car wasn't stopping. They scrambled, diving over guardrails. Nam-jin's sedan smashed into the side of the lead SUV. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and the heavy SUV was spun around like a toy. Nam-jin's airbags didn't deploy. He had disabled them for situations exactly like this. The impact jarred his teeth, snapping his head back, but he kept his hands on the wheel. He spun the car through the gap he had created, tires smoking against the wet asphalt, leaving the wreckage behind. He didn't look back. He didn't check for damage. The front of his car was crushed, steam pouring from the radiator, but the engine was still running. He drove the rest of the way with the hood buckled, a monster emerging from the mist. He wasn't the silver tiger anymore. He was a father coming home. He didn't use a key. He kicked the front door of the mansion with such force that the wood splintered around the lock. Nam-jin stepped into the foyer. He was dripping wet, rainwater mixing with the steam coming off his suit. His chest was heaving. The house was silent. "Bo Kyung," he called out. His voice echoed off the high ceilings. "Appa," a small voice from the hallway. Bo Kyung stepped out of the shadows. She looked so small. She was holding the phone with 2 hands. When she saw him bruised, wet, terrifying, she didn't run away. She ran to him. She buried her face in his soaked coat. "Where is she?" Nam-jin asked, his hand resting on her head. Bo Kyung pointed to the parlor. Nam-jin walked in. Yeon-suk was standing by the window, smoking a cigarette. Her hands were shaking. Sang-woo was sitting on the floor in the corner, holding his bruised arm, staring at nothing. When Yeon-suk saw Nam-jin, the glass of wine slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. "Nam-jin," she whispered, you're never here on Tuesdays." Nam-jin walked over to Sang-woo. He knelt down. The boy flinched, expecting a hit. Nam-jin's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. He gently touched the boy's cheek. "I'm here, son, I'm here." He stood up and turned to Yeon-suk. The look in his eyes made her back up until she hit the wall. "I was disciplining him," she stammered, her voice high and thin. "He broke the table. He's unruly. You don't know, Nam-jin. You're never here. You don't know how hard it is to raise your damaged children." Nam-jin didn't yell. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Bo Kyung's phone. He pressed play. The sound of her screaming, the sound of the glass breaking, the sound of her calling his son a mistake. It filled the room. Yeon-suk's face went pale. I was stressed, I didn't mean." 10 years, Nam-jin said. His voice was quiet, deadly. 10 years I stayed away to protect them from murderers, from thieves, from monsters. He took a step closer. "And all this time," he whispered, "the monster was sleeping in my bed." "You can't do anything," Yeon-suk spat, trying to regain her composure. "I am their mother. I am your wife. If you leave me, I will take half of everything. I will tell the press who you really are." Nam-jin laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You think I care about the money? You think I care about the press?" He pulled a document from his inside pocket, soaked with rain but legible. "Clause 14 of our prenuptial agreement, null and void upon proof of abuse. My lawyers drafted it before we met. I never thought I'd have to use it." He pointed to the door. "Get out." "It's raining," she gasped. "I have nowhere to go." "I don't care," Nam-jin said. "If you are not out of my house in 2 minutes, I will forget that I am a father, and I will remember that I am the silver tiger." Yeon-suk looked at his eyes. She saw the abyss. She ran. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't put on a coat. She ran out the broken front door into the storm, vanishing into the night she belonged to. The mansion was sold 3 days later. Nam-jin didn't go back to the office. He didn't go back to the meeting. He drove Bo Kyung and Sang-woo south, driving until the skyscrapers of Seoul were just a memory in the rearview mirror. They stopped at a small house on the coast of Jeju Island. It wasn't a fortress. It had big windows and unlocked doors. It smelled of salt and pine. On the first night, Nam-jin stood on the porch. He held his black syndicate phone in his hand, the link to his empire, his power, his past. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he tossed it into a metal bucket and lit a match. He watched the plastic melt. He watched the silver tiger burn. The screen door opened. Bo Kyung and Sang-woo stepped out. Sang-woo's arm was bandaged, but he wasn't shaking anymore. "Appa," Sang-woo asked, "are you going back to work?" Nam-jin turned around. He knelt down so he was eye level with his children. He took their hands. "No," Nam-jin said, and for the first time in 10 years he smiled. "My work is done. I'm retired." He pulled them into a hug, shielding them from the wind. The sun began to rise over the ocean, painting the sky in gold and violet. The nightmare was over. The ghost was gone. The father was home.